The stars were watching silently as the alien council gathered deep within the heart of a colossal ship floating in orbit, above a blue planet called Earth. These aliens were not monsters with sharp teeth and claws, but thinkers and leaders of different species that had traveled far across galaxies to unite their strength. They had heard of humanity through long-distance transmissions, through intercepted messages, and through the sharp noise of Earth's history that echoed into space, like ripples in a black ocean. What they learned made them nervous. War after war, division after division, endless hunger for power, explosions, rebellion, destruction. Humanity looked to them like a wildfire that could not be contained. To many on the council, it was only a matter of time before humans would reach the stars and spread that chaos beyond their small world. They believed Earth had to be controlled or isolated or possibly even destroyed before the damage became too great. But before making such a final decision, they agreed to study humans up close. One of the council members suggested something bold. Send a representative of Earth to meet with them directly. Speak, listen, understand. Perhaps there was something hidden behind the noise. The idea was strange to most, but after much debate, they agreed. A request was sent in secret to Earth's leadership. The humans responded carefully, but accepted. And so, a single Marine was chosen. His name was Dane. Dane was not a famous hero or a known leader. He had served many years in Earth's peacekeeping units. He had walked through war zones not to fight, but to talk. He had entered cities broken by violence and helped them breathe again through calm negotiation and firm honesty. He could fight, yes, but he believed strength should never be the first language. It should be the last. That is why he was chosen. Not just to show what humans could do with weapons, but to show what they could be without them. The Alien Council had no idea about this. They saw the uniform. They saw the strong jawline and the straight spine. They thought he was a weapon sent in human form. As Dane stepped off the shuttle into the wide-open hall of the alien ship, many eyes followed him. Tall figures with glowing skin. Thin beings with long arms and humming voices. Armored soldiers that stood beside the walls in case he became violent. The air was filled with tension, as if even the metal underfoot was afraid to speak. But Dane walked slowly, not like a man ready for war, like a man walking into someone else's home, calm and steady. He nodded politely to the guards. He made eye contact without challenge. He spoke only when spoken to. That confused them. Inside the meeting hall, the council sat around a circular table made of clear stone that shimmered with light from within. Each seat belonged to a leader of a different species. They waited in silence until Dane took his place in the center. A voice from the far end finally broke the stillness. It belonged to a council elder whose face looked like carved bark and whose eyes seemed as deep as oceans. He asked Dane a simple question. Why should the galaxy trust humans? Dane looked around slowly and answered in a quiet voice. He said humanity had indeed been through fire and blood. Yes, it had made mistakes. But he also said it was those same mistakes that taught them the value of peace. That without knowing pain, you cannot truly understand healing. That humans were not perfect, but they were learning. Always learning. Some aliens scoffed quietly. Some looked thoughtful. Some simply stared. The next question came from a sharp-looking figure with silver eyes who asked what Dane would do if the council attacked Earth. Dane didn't raise his voice. He didn't speak of revenge. He said that if that day ever came, he hoped there would still be a chance to speak before the final blow. That speaking was not a weakness. It was a delay that gave hope one last breath. The council ended the session without further comment. Dane was escorted to his quarters under watch. Some aliens felt he had been too soft. Others were unsure. A few began to wonder if their fear had made them blind. As Dane sat alone in his room looking out at the stars, he thought about how easily Fear could build walls where bridges should stand. He did not know what the council would decide, but he knew that if war came, it would not be because he had failed to try. On the other side of the ship, a group of alien soldiers whispered among themselves. They didn't trust Dane. They believed humans were dangerous and that this quiet man was only a mask hiding Earth's true face. One of them, a high-ranking officer named Karn, began to plan something in the shadows. Something that could turn fear into fire. He believed peace was a lie, that humans were ticking bombs, and he would do everything to prove it. But for now, the ship remained still. The stars continued to shine, and a single human marine waited with calm patience, carrying the quiet hope of an entire world on his shoulders. He had come not with weapons drawn, but with open hands. The galaxy had expected rage. What they received was something far more powerful, something they did not yet understand. The corridors of the alien ship were wide and tall, shaped like flowing rivers of light and metal running through the giant body of the vessel. Dane walked through those halls, escorted by 2 guards who kept their eyes forward and their hands close to their weapons. They did not speak to him, nor did he try to speak to them. He walked with quiet confidence, not arrogance, but calmness that unsettled many who watched from the corners. The ship itself was a symbol of unity, created by the efforts of many alien civilizations that had once been strangers, but were now allies. Yet even within this great alliance there was unease because of one man from a planet still full of conflict. And he motioned in his private room. Dane stood near the window that showed the endless sea of stars outside. He was not a man lost in dreams. His thoughts were sharp and grounded. He remembered past missions where he had stood between 2 sides ready to destroy each other. He had seen eyes filled with hate soften when someone finally listened. He had seen people drop weapons, not because they were forced, but because someone offered them another way. He believed that same chance existed here too. If only these alien leaders could stop seeing Earth as a threat and start seeing it as a partner. Later in the day, he was invited to walk through the cultural hall of the ship. It was a long gallery filled with holograms and images of history, music, language, and symbols of every species in the Alliance. Dane took his time studying each section, asking polite questions to the guides who watched him carefully. His curiosity was not for show. He truly wanted to understand. One of the guides, a young alien named Lyra, with smooth blue skin and bright eyes, seemed surprised at how gently Dane moved through the hall, as if every story mattered. He stopped at a sculpture of 2 alien warriors, holding broken swords, standing over a river that flowed in opposite directions. He asked Lyra what it meant. She explained that it was a memory of a terrible war that had ended not by victory, but by exhaustion. The river showed how both sides had survived by choosing to walk away. Dane nodded slowly and said that sometimes the hardest thing to do is to stop fighting, especially when pain runs deep. Lyra looked at him for a long moment and said that he did not speak like a soldier. Dane smiled and said that was the point. News of Dane's behavior began to travel across the ship. Some were confused, others were intrigued. A few still remained deeply suspicious. Among them was the officer named Karn, whose belief in human danger was absolute. He watched the recordings of Dane's meetings and his quiet walk through the cultural hall. He saw a man who did not act like the enemy he expected, but that only made Karn more certain that Dane was hiding something. He believed this Marine was trained to deceive, not to build peace. He began speaking with others in private corners of the ship, using fear to fuel agreement. He said that if they waited too long, they would regret it. That humans always smiled before they struck. Meanwhile, the council had called for another meeting. This time they allowed open questions from lower officers and scientists, not just the high leaders. Dane stood once more in the center of the great circle. A scientist asked him why Earth had not yet reached the stars like the Alliance had. Dane replied that humans had learned quickly, but their steps were careful. He said power without wisdom leads to ruin, and that humanity still had much to learn. But they were ready to learn and to share what they had discovered along the way. Communication specialist asked why humans seem to enjoy war through games and stories filled with battles. Dane answered that these stories were not celebration, but reflection. That humans told stories of war not to glorify violence, but to remember the cost. He said those stories taught lessons and warned future generations. He said the true heart of humanity was not found in its anger, but in its ability to rise again and build something better. The room remained quiet after he spoke. No one shouted, no one laughed. Some just looked at each other as if hearing something new for the first time. Even Torah, the sharp-tongued delegate who had challenged Dane before, did not speak. Her expression was thoughtful, not angry. She studied him not like a weapon, but like a mystery she could not solve. After the meeting, Dane returned to his room, but he was not alone for long. A small group of younger alien officers came to speak with him, asking him more questions, this time with interest, not fear. They asked about Earth's music, food, cultures, dreams. Dane answered every question with honesty and patience. He told them that Earth's strength was not just its weapons or machines, but its people and their ability to change, adapt, grow. He said no two humans were the same, and that was both their challenge and their power. On the other side of the ship, Karn continued his secret planning. He had convinced a few officers to support him quietly. He was building a story, a false trail to prove that Dane was here to spy or sabotage. He did not need truth. He needed proof that fit his fear. He began preparing a digital trap, something that would place false evidence inside the ship's system and point the blame at Dane. He believed that once the council saw this, they would act and remove the threat before it was too late. Dane remained unaware of the storm slowly forming around him. He spent his time learning, watching, asking questions. He wrote messages back to Earth telling them that there was hope, that some hearts aboard the ship were opening, that he needed more time. The stars continued to shine through the wide windows. The ship sailed quietly across space, but inside it, pressure was building like a silent drumbeat, waiting to break the peace. Dane did not know how close danger truly was. He did not come here to fight, but soon he would have to decide whether to protect peace with his words or with his actions. Because sometimes, wisdom must stand tall even when the world demands war. Inside the heart of the great ship, the silence before the storm was beginning to fade. What had once been a careful curiosity about the human marine was slowly changing into a quiet unrest. Not everyone on board wanted peace, and not everyone believed that Dane's soft voice and calm words were signs of strength. In the dark corners of the ship where shadows touched metal and whispers traveled faster than light, Officer Karn had already planted the seeds of doubt. He was not alone anymore. A few officers, a few technicians, even a council aide had begun to believe that something was wrong with the way the council was handling the situation. Karn told them stories full of fear. He told them that the human was too quiet, too controlled, too patient. He said this was how enemies worked. That real danger came with smiles and kind words, not guns and fists. His words sank into the minds of those already unsure, and the more they listened, the more they believed. Karn had already begun building a digital trail of lies, a series of fake communication logs, hidden codes, and false system accesses, all carefully placed into the ship's network. He made it look as if Dane had tried to access restricted files and was sending data back to Earth. It was not real, but it looked real, and that was all Karn needed. He knew that once the evidence was found, the council would have no choice but to act. He wanted a trial, a public disgrace, a removal of the human threat before it could grow any deeper. Meanwhile, Dane remained unaware of the storm gathering around him. He spent his time moving through the cultural decks, observing, learning, speaking when invited, and listening when not. He had started to build a quiet connection with Lyra, who often guided him through the historical records of different species. She showed him the stories of how peace had been built after centuries of war, between races who now sat beside each other in the council. Dane listened carefully. He never mocked. He never judged. He asked questions not to challenge, but to understand. And slowly she began to trust him, not because he forced trust, but because he earned it. One day, while walking with Lyra through the engine sector, Dane noticed how the energy pulses moved in rhythm like a heartbeat. He remarked that the ship felt alive and that its unity came not from the parts themselves, but from how they worked together. Lyra paused for a moment and then quietly said that perhaps that was also true for their alliance. That it was not the power of each species, but their willingness to flow as one. Dane agreed and said that was why Earth wanted to join. Not to dominate, not to control, but to be part of something greater than itself. Elsewhere in the command chamber, Karn delivered his fabricated report to the internal security chief, a quiet and cold figure who followed protocol without emotion. The files were reviewed and confirmed to be valid, at least on the surface. The chief did not question how the data was found. He only saw what was shown and followed the rule of law. He contacted the council and scheduled an emergency session. Dane was in his room when the door opened and 4 guards entered. They said nothing. They surrounded him and escorted him out without explanation. He did not resist. He walked silently, knowing something had shifted. He was brought before the council chamber, where the leader sat not with interest this time, but with suspicion. The lights were dimmer than before, and the silence was heavy. The security chief presented the evidence. Communication logs showing data transfers, encrypted signals, timestamps that align perfectly with Dane's access patterns. The council listened without comment. They then turned to Dane and asked for his explanation. Dane stood straight, but did not speak right away. He looked at the files shown before him. He knew he had not done what they claimed. He knew this was false. But he also knew that shouting would not help. Accusing others without proof would only feed the doubt already planted. So he spoke not with fire, but with calm. He said he understood their fear. That trust was difficult, especially with a species new to their eyes and minds. But he asked them to look deeper. He reminded them of his time spent among them, not hiding, not sneaking, but walking openly, learning, asking, listening. He asked if those actions matched what the files now claimed. Some council members shifted uncomfortably. A few looked uncertain. Tora narrowed her eyes but said nothing. The session was paused. Dane was escorted to a holding chamber where he waited behind invisible walls. He sat in silence, his mind turning not with anger, but with questions. Who had done this, and why, and how would he prove otherwise? Lyra heard of the arrest through a friend in security. She was shocked and confused. She had been with Dane often. She had seen no signs of deceit. Something felt wrong. She accessed the data logs herself and found strange patterns, inconsistencies, small cracks that others had missed. She brought her findings to Tora, who still did not trust Dane fully but respected logic. Tora reviewed the data and realized that something had been manipulated. Together, they traced the source of the false files and found a hidden signature buried deep within the access logs, a signature that matched. Karn. The truth was not yet enough. They needed evidence strong and clear. Tora and Lyra prepared a direct analysis of the sabotage and brought it to the council. The session was called again. This time the room felt different. Dane stood silently as Tora presented the findings. The council watched as the real story was uncovered step by step. The planted codes, the falsified logs, the motive behind the sabotage. Karn was called forward, but he denied everything. The council did not believe him. The charges against Dane were cleared. The room remained quiet. Tora turned to Dane and said that she had doubted him, but she now saw that patience had been his strength. Lyra stepped forward and said that his wisdom had done more than any weapon could have done. Dane thanked them both, but said this was not his victory. It was the proof that words, when used with care, could stand stronger than lies, and that trust once broken could still be repaired if one was willing to try. The council did not cheer, they did not celebrate, but they began to see the human, not as a threat, not as a tool, but as a voice. They needed to hear more of Dot, and somewhere deep in the stars, Earth waited, unaware that one Marine had just saved its name from being written in fear. The tension across the ship did not vanish after the truth was revealed, but something in the air had changed. It was as if the pressure that had built silently for days had finally released, though the marks it left behind remained. The council had cleared Dane of all false charges and exposed Karn's deception before all ranks. But healing a broken trust was not as simple as wiping away words on a screen. The ship's corridors now carried quiet conversations about what had happened and what it meant, not only for the human, but for the Alliance itself. Some officers still looked at Dane with suspicion, unable to accept that a human had walked through their halls with nothing but peace in mind, while others began to feel the weight of what they had nearly lost. Had the truth remained buried, Dane did not demand apologies, nor did he hold anger in his heart for those who doubted him. He returned to his quarters, walked the halls, continued his quiet conversations as if nothing had changed, but inside he felt the shift. He had stood before the strongest leaders of many worlds, not with weapons or threats, but with truth and calm resolve, and he had been heard. That meant more than any medal or title ever could. Yet he also understood that fear had deep roots, and that one cleared name would not erase centuries of suspicion. He had to keep going, step by step, moment by moment, building trust not through speeches but through presence. Torah visited him alone, without guards, without formal notice. She stood by the wide viewing window where the stars floated like frozen fire across endless black. She asked Dane how he had remained so composed even when the world seemed ready to fall against him. Dane said he had seen worse than judgment. He had seen children hiding in broken shelters. He had seen people screaming for peace while bombs fell above them. Compared to that, silence in a council room was a gentle thing. Torah listened and said nothing at first. Then she said that she had once believed strength came only through domination, but now she wondered if it came from something else, something harder, like restraint or mercy, or listening when your pride is burning. Dane nodded and said that listening is sometimes the strongest thing a warrior can do. They stood there in silence for a while, watching the stars, and when Torah left, she looked at him not with doubt, but with something closer to respect. Lyra continued to meet with Dane every day, helping him prepare for his final address to the full council. It had been decided that Earth would be given one chance to speak formally, one moment to present their desire to join the Alliance, not through force or fear, but diplomacy. This speech would be remembered. It would decide whether Earth was welcomed or warned. Dane knew the weight of that moment, but he did not fear it. He prepared not a speech filled with promises or pride, but a message shaped by honesty. He would not pretend that humanity was perfect. He would not hide the wars, the greed, the broken roads. But he would also speak of the healing, the effort, the learning. He would speak of what humanity was still becoming, not what it once was. On the day of the address, the Great Hall was filled with delegates from every member of the Alliance, each species present in their full formal presence. The platform in the center slowly rose, and Dane stood upon it alone under the soft light that came from above like sunlight filtered through time. He looked at the crowd not with fear, but with quiet courage, and then he began. He spoke of Earth as a planet of contradictions where kindness and cruelty often walked side by side. He spoke of a species that had stumbled again and again, but kept standing, not out of arrogance, but out of hope. He said that humans had learned not because they were wise from birth, but because they suffered when they failed. He spoke of teachers who risked their lives for peace, of healers who walked through fire, of strangers who became family in places broken by war. He said that if the Alliance judged humanity by its past, it would see fire, but if it judged humanity by its direction, it might see light. He did not ask for trust. He asked for the chance to earn it. He did not ask for power. He asked for presence. He said that Earth did not come to conquer stars, but to find common ground among them. That the strength of humanity was not just in what it could destroy, but in what it could choose not to destroy. The hall remained quiet long after he finished. No one clapped, no one spoke, and yet something had shifted again. Like the slow turning of a great wheel set in motion, not by force, but by patience. That evening the council met behind closed doors to discuss what had been said. There were voices that still doubted, voices that feared, but there were also voices that saw the change in Dane's words and in his actions. One delegate said that perhaps the greatest danger was not humanity, but their own fear of something new. Another said that peace should never come with closed doors. The vote was long and filled with silence, but when it ended, a message was sent. To Earth, the Alliance had agreed to open a path of observation and inclusion. Not full membership yet, but a beginning. Dane received the message in his room. He read it once, then again, then let out a long breath, not of relief, but of quiet satisfaction. He had not come to win. He had come to try, and trying had made a difference. The next day, he walked with Lyra and Tora to the observation deck where the stars stretched forever. They stood there without words, letting the silence speak louder than any speech. Tora said that her world had always taught her to prepare for war, but now she saw that some battles are won with nothing but truth. Lyra smiled and said that maybe the Alliance needed Earth as much as Earth needed them. Dane looked out into the stars and said that humanity was still learning, still growing, but maybe that was exactly what made them ready. Not their power, not their strength, but their choice to change. And somewhere beyond the stars, on a little blue world waiting to be heard, Earth began to dream of its place among the stars, not as a threat, not as a warning, but as a voice of its own. The ship moved slowly through the silent stretch of stars, its great metal body gliding like a shadow across the endless dark. Inside its walls, the atmosphere had changed, not with noise or celebration, but with something deeper, something unspoken. The presence of the human marine had created ripples in the still waters of the Alliance, and though not every mind was changed, not every heart was convinced a shift had begun. It was not loud, it was not sudden, but it was real, and sometimes change begins in silence before it is seen in the world. Dane walked through the upper deck alone, his boots making soft steps against the smooth floor, his eyes following the lines of starlight that poured in from the viewing panels. The decision had been made, and Earth was now granted a position as an observer, not a full member, not yet, but a beginning of a path that might lead to trust, cooperation, unity. For the first time in the history of the Alliance, a human voice would be present in the halls of decisions, a voice not to dominate, but to listen and contribute. And it would be his voice. Dane had been appointed as Earth's first permanent envoy to the Alliance, a position earned not through battle, but through patience and the quiet strength of reason. He remembered the moment he received the message from Earth when his superiors told him the appointment was confirmed. There had been no cheering, no great announcement, only a short message filled with appreciation and a reminder that every word he spoke going forward would carry the weight of a planet behind it. He had accepted the role not out of pride, but because he believed that this was what peace needed, not more weapons, not louder threats, but steady hands and willing hearts. Tora met him on the bridge shortly after. She looked different somehow, not in appearance, but in presence. She had once looked at him like a problem waiting to happen. Now she looked at him like a question that had finally been answered. She handed him a small silver emblem shaped like a spiral with a single point of light at the center, the symbol of diplomatic recognition by the Alliance. She said this belonged to those who earned respect not through victory, but through understanding. Dane took it in his hand, and for a long moment he said nothing. Then he nodded and said he would carry it with care, not as a prize, but as a reminder. Lyra joined them shortly after, her eyes bright and her voice full of calm. She had been assigned to assist Dane as his official cultural liaison, a bridge between species traditions, languages, beliefs. She had asked for the role personally, and the council had agreed. She told Dane that she believed in what he had started and that she wanted to help build it further. Dane thanked her and told her that bridges are not built in one day, and that there would be struggles and mistakes, but together they could walk the path forward. As the days passed, preparations were made for Dane's formal introduction to the other allied worlds. He would travel to each homeworld in turn, meeting with their leaders not to demand anything, but to show Earth's face with honesty and respect. Some worlds were excited, others were cautious, but all agreed to listen. The Alliance ships were refueled, coordinates were shared, travel paths were set. A new journey was about to begin, one not marked by conquest, but by conversation. Before his departure, Dane returned to the council chamber one last time. The circular room where he had once stood as a stranger now welcomed him as a guest of honor. The elder who had first questioned him, the one with the ocean eyes and voice, like old trees, rose from his seat and addressed him. He said that fear had once been their guide, and it had nearly led them to mistake silence for threat and patience for strategy. But now they understood that sometimes the strongest among them are those who do not shout but listen, those who do not push forward with fists but with open hands. He said that Dane had reminded them of their own beginnings, of how the Alliance itself had been born not from power, but from the pain of misunderstanding and the will to overcome it. Dane replied simply. He said that he did not come to change them but to meet them. That Earth was not perfect and had never claimed to be, but they were willing to learn, willing to grow. He said that unity is not built by those who believe the same things, but by those who choose to walk together even when the path is difficult. The room remained silent, but the silence no longer felt cold. It felt full. As he stepped back into the corridors and walked toward the ship that would carry him to the stars, Dane felt the weight of what he carried. Not just the voice of a planet, but the quiet expectation of those who had placed trust in him. He knew the road ahead would be long and filled with moments of doubt, but he also knew that what had started here could not be undone. A single step, made with care, could begin a journey that reshaped entire worlds. Torah and Lyra stood beside him as the transport ship's door opened. They spoke of the journey ahead, of the places he would see, the questions he would face. Dane listened quietly and then told them that peace is not made by words alone, but by the effort behind those words, the patience to stand still when anger rises, the courage to speak softly when the world demands a shout. As the ship lifted from the great vessel and moved out into open space, Dane looked back one last time at the massive Alliance ship that had once held suspicion, fear, conflict, and now held the fragile start of something better. The stars stretched ahead, a path unknown but filled with possibility. Behind him was a history marked by fire, but ahead was a future shaped by wisdom. The galaxy had feared humanity's rage, but now it had seen something else, something deeper, something that could not be measured by strength or size, but only by choice. And in the heart of that choice stood one Marine who had shown that wisdom, when chosen over war, could reach farther than any weapon ever could. And so he journeyed forward, not to conquer, not to prove, not to demand, but to represent a world still learning, a world still healing, a world finally ready to listen. The end.